Well, friends, we are live. Hopefully, you know that theme song that you have tuned in to another episode of Systematic Geekology. And I hope you're ready. Strap in. This is going to be a full and zesty episode, and I'm already looking forward to it. And you hear that? Oh, there's the sonic charge. There's the sonic charge. Here we are. Welcome, friends. Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology and another episode of Faith and Science. We've been over the last few months, and we'll keep doing it in the future. Just kind of random topics and conversations around faith and science because systematic geekologists like us are yes and people. We try to create positivity, harmony, peace, good, healthy conversations around those things we geek out on. And we're not afraid of the nuance of the both and mysteries of life. And so I would say, I would speak for all my hosts for one degree or another, that we are both faith and science people, that our approach to faith, our approach to life embraces both faith and science. We don't see it as an either or. We don't see it as a battle to the death, and one will win over the other. We're faith and science. And tonight we have a special guest, and he's not really a guest. He is one of our hosts at Systematic Geekology. I don't know if you guys know this, but Andy Walsh, Dr. Andy Walsh, wrote a book that has the perfect blend of faith and a high view of scripture, along with mainstream legit science, and using pop culture and geeky references as parables to help illustrate how they both can work together. And so this perfect blend of faith and science and geek culture is really what we do here at Systematic Geekology. And Andy did it first with this book way back in 2018. And before Systematic Geekology even kicked off, before it was even a thing, Andy and I hung out because we ran in similar circles around faith and science. And I was there at the beginning when his book launched. And so we've done a lot of conversations around those things we geek out on Systematic Geekology. And Andy's been on a lot of episodes. You can find those episodes. But we've never really had a conversation around specifically his book that he wrote, that you can find in bookstores or perhaps Amazon, perhaps your local bookstore can order it for you. Faith Across the Multiverse, Parables from Modern Science. And so, Andy, welcome. I'm glad I get to interview you and do a book interview of a book that's been around a while, but I'm glad that our listeners can experience this perhaps for the first time.
Yeah, thanks for creating this opportunity, for giving me this opportunity. I'll start on a little bit of a bummer, so hopefully we can go up from there. In that, full disclosure, the publisher no longer makes print copies of the book.
Dang, we got to. I'm gonna start a campaign tomorrow, Andy. I'm gonna do it. We're gonna.
You might be able to find a hard copy lying around somewhere. Amazon might be able to blow the dust off of one to ship you, but the ebook is still available on the publisher's website, hendrickson.com. And okay. I have a few copies that I bought to sell at events that then didn't happen because of the pandemic. And so if you can get in touch with me, I can sell you a copy. I have a few hard copies left. But I'm sorry to say that I don't want people spending a lot of time trying to hunt down a print copy that does not exist.
Right.
But I'm still happy to have this conversation, and I'm still happy to help Hendrickson sell some ebooks.
There you go.
Them, continue to bring in the pennies.
Yeah, I love that. And, we support, we have a thing called All Reading Counts and ebooks and hard copies, all that stuff. We've done episodes on that. And yeah, if you message us, DM Andy, he is reachable and findable. He might even show up at a Comic-Con or in-person event at some point in the near future, and we'll bring them to there at our booth, at our table, and do that. Andy, before we jump into your book, why don't you share with us, remind us kind of your approach to faith, or the tradition you're a part of, or the brand of Christianity that you embrace, that you identify as, and your vocation of science. Remind us what you do in the sciences. So kind of those two together, kind of your story before we get into your book.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in the sort of non-denominational evangelical world. We were part of a couple different churches growing up for a variety of reasons, moving and different things. Um, and I attended evangelical Christian schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. Right. So to, that was kind of my upbringing in the Christian world. And so those were the kind of churches, as I moved around from grad school, college, and grad school, and now Pittsburgh, where I work and live with my family. Those are the kinds of churches that we attended. So that kind of broad evangelical, we don't like to put labels on things kind of church.
Right. Right. And I guess you were involved with InterVarsity too, because we overlapped with a faith and science grant we got at Holy Trinity. There were some mutual friends or someone that was a part of InterVarsity that got the same kind of grant to go into faith and science discussions, and you were a part of that InterVarsity group, I do believe, and you even did some blog work and blog writing as part, and that's how we met through that STEAM grant, I think, right? Is that true?
That is correct. That is how we met. And yes, I was involved with InterVarsity as an undergrad at Carnegie Mellon and as a graduate student at Johns Hopkins University.
Yeah.
And I have been blogging for InterVarsity for, I don't know how to think about. I think it's over a decade now. I think 2014 was when I started. So I think it's over a decade now. Over 450 blog posts on emergingscholars.org.
Yeah.
Right now I'm on a monthly schedule, so the second Wednesday of every month, folks can get a new blog post there. They can show up on the front page. I think you can subscribe to get them emailed to you. You can look for them on, you can follow Emerging Scholars on Facebook or any, where you get your social medias. So I've been doing that for quite a while as well. That was how you and I met. The STEAM grant had money to support writing a series of blog posts on faith and science topics, which were later compiled into a different book that I contributed a section or a chapter to that book. But there are a variety of folks from all different disciplines, all different faith traditions, but all kind of gathered under that InterVarsity banner.
And just to add, when I was reading your blog posts, I think you made geeky references, and that made me reach out to you. I was like, not only science, not only faith, but you made an Avengers reference, an X-Men reference, a Scarlet Witch reference. And I was like, there you go. There's my people. There's my people. So I think that's what my spidey sense went off with our Venn diagram of what we like and overlap with.
Yeah, there'll be references here and there, and then once or twice a year, I try to kick in a movie review or something like that, or a sci-fi book review, just to kind of mix it up. Talk about both the science of the whatever the story is, and then also whatever sort of theological ideas it might inspire as well. I think my most successful sort of like most hits when it launched blog post was a review of or commentary on Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah.
That Sean, what's his name? Why am I blanking? But he's a apologist. His dad was a big apologist, and somehow he came across it and shared it on his social media, and so I got 100, 200 hits that day,
nice.
Which was, in relative terms, very exciting. That was my 10 seconds of internet fame.
And here you are on YouTube talking about your book. That's cool. Now, your science. So that kind of faith background, deep a part of your life and family life, and growing up, and now you're a scientist. And remind us what kind of science you do, and then we'll hop into kind of what how you integrate that in the book.
Right. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I did my undergrad at Carnegie Mellon, where I studied biology. I was already at that point interested in the biology of infectious diseases. I had been, it was really kind of the start of the AIDS pandemic and the awareness, growing awareness of that, and the story of Ryan White, which some people may remember, some people whose bald heads look like ours, was a young man who contracted the HIV from a blood product transfusion or blood product treatment. for another illness that he had, and so that kind of raised awareness of, hey, it's not just specific communities, but anybody can get this disease, and it has significant consequences. And so that kind of got me, aware of the need for, dealing with infectious diseases, that they are not just a thing of the past. They're not something that we have eliminated, that we've, cured, all of them. And they're not just for people in foreign countries. And so, so that inspired me to study biology. Then I went to grad school at Johns Hopkins at their School of Public Health, and did a PhD in molecular microbiology with an eye towards working in public health, or working on research of drugs or vaccines or something, a little bit amorphous, but I knew I wanted to be in that space. Wasn't so hot at the actual bench science as a graduate student. And so I kind of pivoted to where my strengths, my skills lay in kind of computer programming and math. And fortunately, in that same department, there was a lab that did ecology of infectious diseases. And ecology has traditionally been a more quantitative science. They're a little bit more comfortable with seeing the occasional mathematical formula, the occasional computer program, occasional statistical analysis. And so I got involved in that. And after a postdoc in that kind of computational biology, statistics of infectious disease space, I took a job at a company called Health Monitoring, where I've been for over 16 years. Currently, their chief science officer, and that job title was given to me about 60% because it sounded cool. It's the same job title as Mr. Spock, and about 40% that was an appropriate job title for my experience and the kind of work that I was doing. And so, Health Monitoring, we collect emergency department data and other kinds of data in an anonymized fashion. So we're getting individual records, but not like your name and address or anything like that. We just want to keep track of how many people are coming into the hospital today because they were in a car accident, or because they have a fever, or because they overdosed on drugs, or any of the number of things. Unfortunately, a lot of things that people come to the hospital for are bad news. I have to read a lot of these. I will go through periods of time where, for my job, I have to read these things, in bulk, to kind of figure out what's going on, to figure out new categories we might be able to deal with. And those are some of the hardest days, because you're reading about everybody's worst day of their life.
Wow.
In a concentrated fashion, right? So I'm going through thousands of people's worst days, or one of the worst days of their lives, all at once. But so we're doing that to try to be able to keep track of what people are experiencing, where help is needed, and what kind of help is needed most. And so, in recent years, that's been a lot of focus on, who has COVID or other related respiratory illnesses. And a lot of focus on, who's experiencing mental health issues, mental health concerns, who's experiencing, substance use disorders, things like that. But there's all kinds of things. And sometimes it gets a little bit more interesting. For example, I was just in a meeting today. We have the World Cup is coming to the United States next summer, including some of the places that our software is used. And so we're going to get to help try to make sure that everything is fine and dandy at the World Cup, and that folks can have a good time and not have to worry about their safety or their health, or the health of the people around them. So those are some of the more fun times, even though there's still some serious things. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, and then we can just kind of focus on, hey, it's a fun event, and we're doing a little bit of our part to keep it a fun and safe and healthy event.
And that's in California. Is that going to happen in California?
It is all over the country.
All over.
Yeah, and actually all over the continent. I apologize to our friends in Mexico and Canada, because it's actually North America is the host of the World Cup, and so there will be games in several cities in Canada. There will be games at that big stadium in Mexico City, and there will be games at, I think it's like a dozen cities or something like that across the United States as well, including. Our customers are primarily focused in the Northeast, and so it's the Philadelphia and the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey that are the focus of our work, particularly. But yeah, there are games. There probably are games in California, but not exclusively in California.
Yeah, I hope our borders. Anyway, state of the world. It's hard not to go down the road, down a dark path of thinking about coming and going and logistics of all those things. But hopefully, yeah, your work in the sciences, your work of the caring, supportive services that are out there. People pay attention to that stuff. All right, so you have this background of faith and science, and then you wrote this book. What was it that inspired this book? What made you're creating content on your blogs and those things? What was it that inspired you? Like, I have to write this book and get it out there to the public.
Yeah, so it really the origin story of the book goes back to a conversation that I had in grad school when as part of the university group that was there, we were having one of our weekly Bible studies, talking through one of the passages. I forget which one. Where it talks about that Jesus's return could be any day now, right? His disciples are discussing how, or Paul is writing about how we don't know when it'll happen, and we expect that it could happen at any time, and so we need to be ready at any time. And there we were sitting, give or take 2,000 years later, going, it doesn't feel like it could be any day now. And so how do we reconcile those two things? And I had recently had in one of the math classes that I was taking, we'd recently discussed something called the exponential probability distribution, which is just one of these, a math formula that you use to estimate or model the likelihood of different events. So everybody's likely familiar with the Gaussian distribution or the normal distribution, right? That's the one we kind of think of all the time when we talk about probabilities, where things are, there's kind of a middle, and things are more likely to be in the middle and less likely to be out the edges. It's got that bell shape that you might be familiar with from grading or what have you. So things like people's heights, right? There's a lot of people that are in that kind of 5.5 to 6 foot range, and then there's the occasional 7.5 foot gentleman or person, and the occasional 4 foot something person, and so forth, right? So that it's that kind of distribution. But not everything follows those kinds of distributions. In fact, we need different kinds of models, and one of them is this exponential probability distribution, and it has a very interesting feature, which is that you can use it to model how long you have to wait for something to happen, and it has no memory of how long you've been waiting. So the probability of something happening today is the same. Would be the same if you've been waiting an hour, if you've been waiting a day, if you're waiting 2,000 years. It's still always the same probability. And so, there are practical applications of that. Electronics, solid state electronics, tend to fail according to this distribution. Right, so they're not like mechanical parts where they're kind of wear down, and so you can kind of guess it's going to last about 10,000 miles or 6 years of use or whatever, like for mechanical kinds of things. But electronics, it's just sort of like it's going to work until one day it doesn't, and so we use that distribution to model that sort of thing. And again, so it had that neat property of, hey, it actually could be true that the probability of Jesus returning is the same, was the same on day 2 post resurrection or post ascension. And day or year 2000, right? If we model it with the exponential distribution, if it follows that distribution, it could be the exact same probability. And one of the other kids in the Bible study was a math student, and so he was also familiar with it. And he went, "Oh, hey, that's really cool. I had never thought about that, but that really helps me to deal with. I'd always kind of struggled with that question, and now gives me a new way to think about that question. And so that had always kind of stuck in my head of, hey, sometimes knowing a little bit of science, knowing the concept of science, knowing the language of science gives you a little bit of a different way to talk about things. We weren't inventing new theology, right? We didn't have a new idea about when Jesus was going to come back, or how to read those passages. We just had a different way of understanding what we already believed, or what other people had already said about those passages. And so over time, as I was kind of thinking about different science topics and ideas and what have you, and listening to different sermons and thinking about different theological ideas, more and more of those connections kind of started to form. And eventually I got tired of carrying them around in my head and thought, there's enough of these that I bet if I wrote them down, they would take something like a book shape. And with a little bit of prodding and poking and encouragement, eventually they did. And so that was kind of where the book came from.
Yeah, it's amazing when we talk to creators, whether it's comic book creators or people that have written books on this show or others. It is like, man, I have all this stuff in my head. I have to get it out there. And even if like a couple people read it, that's fine. I just need to get it out there. And I have a book of me about like theology and philosophy around surfing, and I'm trying to get that going when I have free time. But I don't care if just my family reads it and a couple of friends, but just to get it out there and get it out is an accomplishment. I think we're human beings. Are creating the image of a creative God, so we ourselves are in turn creative as well. So yeah, I love it. And not only like in terms of this, what you've done with the sciences and faith and applying, like you said, parables from modern science. You're tying in a lot of geeky pop culture references, like what you reference in this book. Just to name a few: X-Men, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Indiana Jones, Groundhog Day, Lord of the Rings, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and even Squirrel Girl. That I have something we'll talk about at the end of this. X Factor, some of your favorite X-Men characters. We really bond our love of X-Men and the mutants, and being a molecular biologist and mutations and evolution, you're a part of that too. So I really love that. Now in your book, you kind of break it down into four parts. You have four languages that you focus around, languages of mathematics, physics, biology, and computer science. And in our work of faith and science, we really emphasize, at least I've learned, the importance of being able to define terms and help people understand what you're talking about, not just throw a term at somebody because they may automatically have their own assumptions of what you mean by that, even not only when it comes to science, but also God and theology. And so these are pretty hard topics. These are big time classes that people go to school and grad school and get doctorates in because there's a depth to it all. And what I think you do great in this book is that you serve as kind of a translator, as someone who helps teach this language to an interpreter per se for people who are going into these different subjects. What was it about this that made you break it down to these four parts, and why these four topics around science?
Yeah, so like I said, I was kind of carrying around and accumulating those different ideas, those different connections, and started to think about, as I was going to have to write them down and organize them, try to think of what was a helpful way to organize them. And they kind of fell into these categories, partly because these are the kinds of things that I was reading and interested in. So in addition to studying biology and computer science sort of more professionally and informally, I had also taken some math classes and was also reading a lot of like popular science physics books to kind of keep up with, well, what's all this quantum physics stuff about, and general relativity and dark matter and all those kinds of things. And so, those were kind of the topics that I felt most comfortable having something to say about. I'm not a quantum physicist or anything like that, but I felt like I could say something on those topics more than some others. And then also, I was seeing that it kind of fit into a pattern where you could move from the more abstract to the more concrete. So the flow of the book is in the order that you got it there: math to physics to biology to computer science. And it's also intended to be a kind of a flow from the big abstract ideas about God in the mathematics section to God incarnate in the physical world, and so those as in the person of Jesus, and so that's what we talk about with the language of physics. And then biology being the church, the body of Christ, and how does that work? How do we get along together? And then computer science, some of the more nitty gritty practical, like what do we just got to do from day to day to
Nice.
To live out our faith, to get along with each other, and all those kinds of things. And so I was hoping that would kind of give it a informal kind of systematic theology to it, right? So we're covering some of the big topics from what do we mean when we talk about God, to Jesus, to the church, and practical matters. Certainly not as thorough or careful as actual systematic theologies, but trying to give some real structure to it and cover a lot of bases. Right? I also want to give people a lot of bang for their buck, and I didn't want to just talk about one thing or two things, but I really wanted to give a breadth first approach to these ideas. Partly because I wanted to give people a sense that, hey, there's a lot of opportunities there, right? There's a lot of places where these things come in contact, and maybe math isn't your thing, and you want to skip ahead to the physics chapters or the biology chapters, or maybe you're really interested in Jesus and you want to skip ahead, skip straight to the physics and Jesus stuff. Like, that's fine too. I I get that not everything in the book may be for everybody, but hopefully there's something in there by giving you kind of this buffet. Hopefully there's something in there that will spark a connection for you.
I love that. And you sprinkle in it, and it's all throughout. It's just ingrained and tangled with all of it is pop culture references and examples that we see in movies and comic books and sci-fi. So you keep us engaged, not just with the science, not just with theology, not just with scripture references and stories from the Bible and how modern science can help illuminate some of those ideas and understanding of God and bring a depth to it. But you also bring in like what pop culture, what we're watching on TV in the movies. Is there a particular, I think I know where you might go with this, but is there a particular like pop cultural reference or hero or something in there that's your favorite that you're really proud of in this book that you were able to lift up?
I think in terms of being things that I'm proud of, I was happy to be able to include a chapter focused on Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, who was a relatively new creation at the time.
Yeah.
Because one, that book, her comic, as written, particularly as written by G. Willow Wilson, really, delves into the challenges of being a person of faith and being connected to one of the traditional, theology, monotheistic religions, and living in the modern world. And so I think a lot of the questions that Kamala faces about her relationship to her parents, her relationship to her faith, her relationship to the mosque and the community around the mosque. I think Christians, can recognize a lot of the same issues there in terms of, the world outside, and popular culture and so forth is going in one direction, but my faith feels like maybe it's telling me something different. How do I reconcile these things? How do I respect my parents, but also, live in the world that's different from the world that they grew up in? All those kinds of things. And so I felt that it was really good to be able to make that connection, bring those in, and be in a little bit, very, very little bit of a dialogue with another faith tradition in hopefully a constructive and positive way, rather than critiquing. I don't pretend to know enough about Islam to even begin to critique it,
Right.
But hopefully highlight a little bit of the shared values, shared interests that might be able to develop a further conversation there.
Yeah, and I think what Miss Marvel does, Kamala Khan does well. G. Willow Wilson, so brilliant, and Joshua Noel will love this. It's one of his favorite creators and characters and authors. It just showing the tension of taking your faith seriously and trying to live in this world as an authentic human being, as a hero, as someone with gifts into it. So you really hear that tension from a young person, teenager, emerging adult point of view, but also anybody who has a kind of faith who wants to take it seriously and live it in an authentic way in the world. You're going to experience tensions and doubts and have questions. And so I agree. That was a great pull. And I think, man, we've seen how she's grown as a character and on Disney Plus, and hopefully will show up again in more big time Avengers stuff. And again, like one of your chapters, or phrases you have in there, you got my science and my theology. You lift up. You don't water down Scripture. You don't compromise your understanding of God with your engagement with science, and rather you allow science to help deepen how you understand the world and your curiosity about God and theology. Maybe are there some role models? You lift up some role models in the book, some people. Are there some role models that, in terms of people? Like I tell my confirmation and youth group, I'm like, look, whatever question you have, you're not the first person to ask it. Whatever you're wrestling with, other people have wrestled with it too. And the stereotype is that if you're a person of science, you shouldn't have faith. And if you're a person of faith, then you're not going to believe the science. But there's a lot of smart, awesome people, Andy being one of them, and others who are deep people of faith who also take science seriously and embrace it. So are there some role models? You lift up some of the book, but there's some role models that you have of people who, do a good job in integrating faith and science together.
Yeah, so I can mention a couple of people there in terms of writers and sort of public thinkers. John Polkinghorne and Alistair McGrath were some of the first people that I encountered as a young adult who were thinking and writing in this space. Both of them have written a number of books. John Polkinghorne was a physicist who had a successful career as a physicist, and then kind of had a second career as a theologian. And to the point of going and getting a second degree and having this whole second career as a theologian, and so writes a lot of different books about those intersection. And Alistair McGrath, had more of a biology background, but similar kind of story in that he worked in the sciences for a while and now is a professor in theology, or a professor of faith and science, I think, or something like that is his job title.
Yep.
And so those were authors and writers who had a big impact. In my sort of personal life, obviously my parents are always a big influence on everybody, but my parents were definitely modeled that kind of thing of it all fits together, and we can ask questions and then we can find the answers. We have kind of running gag in our family that it's hard to go through a dinner without bringing up a reference book. When I was a kid, that literally meant going to the shelf and opening up the encyclopedia or the atlas or some kind of physical reference book. Increasingly these days it means pulling out your phone and Googling something. But yeah, we are a family that likes to know the answers to things and likes to go and learn them, not just guess or try to dredge them up from what we might be able to invent in our minds. But there's somebody who has asked this question, somebody knows the answer. Let's go and find what that person has shared with us. So there was that. And I would also highlight my postdoc advisor at Carnegie Mellon, Roni Rosenfeld,
Nice.
who had been doing work in natural language processing and computer science, and at the time that I was looking for a postdoc, wanted to get into some kind of intersection with public health, precisely because of his Jewish faith, and the traditions there of wanting to be of service,
Nice.
Improve the world, make things better for other people. And so he saw an opportunity to apply what he had been researching and working on in a way that might be beneficial to the public health community. And he hired me on basically to help him to learn more about that world so that we could find those intersections. And part of that is meant we had conversations about our respective beliefs and faiths and how those motivated, how we had that shared motivation of wanting to be of service in this way, even though we came from slightly different, although obviously overlapping religious traditions.
Nice. Yeah, and I was a marine biology major. Started off in college. I got weeded out really fast, and then eventually became a pastor. But it is interesting to me that I've kind of looped around, and I'm not an expert in science at all, but I'm very curious. I geek out on those things, especially astrophysics and cosmology, with my love of sci-fi and comic books and those kinds of things. But I've grown to be more, I guess, curious about questions than I am about having the right answer. And I think as you go into science, most people I talk about who are scientists, they get really curious and fascinated about something, and they just keep going down these roads. And it's not like they're trying to answer all the questions, like more answers to their certain questions answers up more questions that go deeper. You never finish. And I think theology should be like that too. It shouldn't be like just, Richard, you have all the answers and it's done here. Where does that curiosity to lead you? And an example of that, and even bring it up in the book, that seeing God as a co-creator, a creator with us, also a nerd, that perhaps God is a big geek and a big nerd and just geeks out on all these things. And I was thinking of, like, we think of the kind of God as being infinitely big, but in our work in quantum physics, or what quantum physicists let us know, that you can go infinitely small as well. So maybe God, when Jesus was telling these parables about seeds and small things making a big difference that still matter, no matter how small you are, that God is infinitely small. Too, in both directions, infinitely big, infinitely small. God is both directions. Is there something in the sciences that like shed some light on you, that had an aha moment, a light bulb, where you're like, I'm seeing God in a deeper way? You talk about Jesus and now be an analogy to light in your book, but is there something in there that kind of were like, I never thought of God that way through your work in science?
Through the work that I actually do.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really put it in the book because I was still earlier on in my career and so forth. So the actual work that I do to day, I hadn't perhaps thought as much about it. But certainly, seeing the different needs that people have. I mean, I talked before about kind of having to get concentrated doses of people's worst days, right? So sort of seeing all the different needs that people have and the concern. And so I think that perhaps gives me a different, right? So that's God's experience all the time, right? I do that in a very small way.
Wow. Yeah.
For very short periods of time, and I find it overwhelming. And I have to go and take a break, and I have to go and do something for my mental health to make sure that I kind of get out of that space because and to remind myself that like this is for each person is only dealing with one of these things, and I'm having to reflect on, while not personally experience, but I'm reflecting on a number of these different things. Right, so that's a different experience, and nobody else is no one person is actually suffering all these different illnesses all at once, and so trying to like kind of recalibrate my mindset, right? But that's
Nice.
on some level that's God's point of view all the time, right?
Right.
All the suffering that all people are experiencing at any given moment, God is aware of in some capacity. What exactly that looks like, we've kind of talked about on other episodes, that the limitations of our ability to understand what God's experience is like. But we can say with to some degree, right, that is what the Bible testifies to, that God is aware of what each and every one of us has experienced, has gone through, and so what must that be like? But of course, that is balanced at the same time with all the joy that everyone is experiencing at that moment. God is also aware of in some fashion, and so while I wouldn't say that it balances out, or that that makes it okay for the people that are suffering, that somewhere else there's somebody who's experiencing joy or anything like that. Uh, it just I think it's a different way of thinking about or trying to wrap my head around what is the experience of God like, and what does He have to do to wrestle with these things.
I love that. As science not only is it's not unraveling the mysteries of the universe, but there's also this understanding of how to be a good steward of creation and the world around us who've been trusted with. You're tapping into the mind of God of how the world operates, but also leads to a care for the other. And how we do that. And I think, a big hero role model of mine is Francis Collins and his work with faith and science and what he's done with the human genome and vaccinations. And he just put an article, I shared on Facebook, of he's worried about the current state of politics and the current administration, how it's undermining science and second guessing. They see a science as another institution to break down because they feel threatened by it for some reason. And the ripple effect that's going to have on how we care for others, how we care for our neighbors, and how we understand the universe. And so, and in your book, I think a reference, a deep cut for you talk about Squirrel Girl, which isn't like a mainline headline or Avenger, but you share this pattern that, like in most comic book superheroes, you have what's the problem, find where the problem is, punch the problem solved, move on. And then you talk about in your computer science aspect that like Squirrel Girl is different. Squirrel Girl doesn't necessarily find the problem, then punch it and then win, but there's a thoughtfulness, there's a talking, there's a listening, there's a problem solving when it comes to mathematics and computer science. Yeah, her superpower, she can talk to squirrels and other things, but there's a thoughtfulness to it. Ryan North, the author of that, who is a big time author right now in writing Fantastic Four and writing One World Under Doom in our current comics, wrote Squirrel Girl, helped create it. And so share a little bit more of that. Like what can science can help us understand the world better, but also help us care for each other in a depth that perhaps we didn't see before. Can't just punch it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, the squirrel thing about the Squirrel Girl comic specifically, right? So the comic was called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, and it was having a moment there,
Yeah.
and part of the gimmick was that she went up against some of the biggest and toughest threats that the Marvel Universe has to offer, and she never lost. But what winning looked like for her was very different than what winning looks like for a lot of her other fellow heroes. So when she goes up against Galactus or Doctor Doom, she can't punch them into submission. She can't out cosmic energy them, but she can, she can understand them. She brings empathy. She brings listening. and she tries to understand what their needs are, why they're doing the things that they're doing. Something that my wife has taught me is that she's picked up from other communities is the notion that behavior is communication. So what,
wow.
when these folks are doing these things, right, they are communicating something that they may or may not be consciously aware of, right? But they're communicating something about what they need, what they want, what their values are, and so forth. And so she tries to engage with that and figure out, okay, well, how do we address those needs in a way that is more compatible with everyone else getting their needs met as well, and to varying degrees of satisfaction of the other party. So I found that to be exciting, and of course, that comes from the computer science section, and the I was trying to, and the other thing about Squirrel Girl is that by day she is, at least under the pen of Ryan North, she is a computer science undergraduate student, and so there will be issues of that Squirrel Girl comic where you get little tidbits about how to build a relational database and the proper the proper form in which to store your data in a relational database, or some of these other algorithms and so forth. And so that's why she was in the computer science section, and I was trying to describe her approach to superheroing in the form of an algorithm or pseudocode. That is definitely an area where the development in the past few years of how computer science and computer science algorithms are impacting our day to day and how we care for people, right? That just exploded.
Wow.
That whole section of the book would probably need to be rewritten just to reflect the
accelerating nature. The accelerating nature of that. Well, what leads me to another question, in terms of if you were you wrote this in 2018 and it still holds up, like it's all there. You made me also want to go back and I got to buy Ryan North's run on Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. I knew of it and different things, but I got to go get that graphic novel. You maybe want to go read it. We'll do an episode on that at some point.
But is there a chunky omnibus out there for you?
I know. I got to go find it. I have a gift certificate. I'm going to do it. Is there a fifth language to add to this? Like here we are, 7 years later, post, first run of Trump, pandemic, we're now in like the streaming wars. We're through Endgame. There's all kinds of phases with Marvel. There's Star Wars has emerged on the streaming service. Like there's so much different now. It's a different kind of world than it was when this book first came out, even though this book still holds up big time. Is there a fifth language or a fifth part that you would add, or a bonus chapter that you would pull in? And is there a geeky reference that you would use as the parable to illuminate it?
Oh, okay. Part of me is inclined to think that given everything that's going on in the world right now, that maybe the fifth language would need to be the language of science itself, the language of the scientific method. How do scientists talk not about what they're studying, but what they do and how they do it and why they do it, right? And so the scientific method itself might need to be, I don't know, a prequel to the book, or something along those lines. Because I think a lot of the questions that people have right now are around how does science do what it does? Why does it work that way? Why do we believe it when it tells us certain things, or not believe it when it tells us certain things? And so maybe a better understanding of what scientists are doing each day and why they do it that way and not a different way would be helpful.
I think that's excellent. Tell me to add that, because I think one thing of that was not the pandemic the COVID pandemic was a whole thing, but I think one of the things that we saw was science happening in real time. And so people were like, wait a minute, you said this earlier, now you're saying this? How come you changed your mind? Conspiracy theories were created around the pandemic when we were just kind of, look, we're learning as this go. You're watching science in real time of experimentation, learning new things, pulling some things back, you don't necessarily have to wash your groceries because the virus probably is not on your lettuce or what you're buying from, but wearing a mask so you don't breathe on your neighbor in front of you because it's a respiratory virus is a helpful thing. So that was one of the things that was kind of frustrating when, and I think it was just people didn't understand the language. What's the scientific method? How does science work? So yeah, a whole chapter on how science work, that process behind the scenes. Is something that would be important, and we put up on YouTube kind of a link. It's in our chat where to find the where to find your book too. But yeah, is there a geeky reference that you would add to that? What could we
Yeah.
add?
So one thing that comes to mind. So I have one of the chapters deals with the movie and the book The Martian by
Yes.
Andy Weir. And Andy Weir, I think, does an excellent job of dramatizing the scientific process and creating problems, creating narrative problems out of scientific issues, and then using science or knowledge from science to address them. The Martian is really good at that, and so you see in the movie, you see someone's problem solving of, okay, I got to do this, let's try this, let's try that. The book of The Martian, I think, does an even better job of that. There's a whole sequence that isn't in the
Yeah,
film.
it's a good book. It's a great book.
Where he's driving along, and his rover or his vehicle is powered by solar panels, and so it's heavily dependent on how much sunlight it's getting, and there's too much dust. That's a problem, and he starts driving into a dust storm, and so that's decreasing the power of his solar panels, and it's going to impact. And if he knows that if he drives the wrong way, if he drives into the heart of the storm, he'll run out of juice and be stranded, like a sailor on out in the ocean where there's no wind, and stuck in the doldrums. And so he has to figure out, how do I know, without the benefit of being able to pull up a weather forecast or a satellite image, how do I know where the heart of the storm is, and how do I move, stay to the edges of it and move away from it? And so he goes and he sets up a whole set of experiments to do that. So that is a great place to go. But that I kind of did that already. So maybe the most recent book by Andy Weir was called Project Hail Mary. It's going to be a film starring Ryan Gosling next year sometime. They've already filmed it.
Oh wow!
For some reason, they're making us wait a whole nother year for it. But
What's the name of that again?
The book is called Project Hail Mary. Okay. I assume that the movie will have the same title, but it might have a different title by the time it comes out. You know how they do these things sometimes.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think I might have even liked that book a little bit more. It's
cool.
A little bit more parent friendly. The Martian was a little bit more raw in the language, as you're.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Project Hail Mary kind of toned that down a little bit for a wider audience, and it's a cool story. Microbiology is at the center of the story. It touches on climate science. It touches on microbiology. It touches on contact with alien life.
Ooh,
so it's a lot of cool ideas.
Talking all my favorite things. All my favorite things.
Again, with at least the novel does a good job of, okay, here's a problem. How do we science it? How do we set up some tests to figure out what the answer is? So yeah, I think there's something there in the books and the corresponding movies from Andy Weir that I think might be a good place to go for talking about how do we do science itself? What is the language of science itself?
Yeah, that's good. I again, I have a gift certificate to a bookstore, and that's going to be on the list too. I'll go find that too. That's a great recommendation. Yeah. So and I also think about the accelerated nature of AI and robotics, and that's part of computer science and part of the things we do with that. But I think talking more about being good stewards of that tool. I tell my congregation, tell my people, I'm not scared of AI. I'm not scared of tech. I'm not scared of science. But I am nervous about the people who wield it or control it, or what people will do with it. And that was my hesitancy of the present day presidential election and campaign and those in charge now of who's going to have that in their control and wielding to have control over that. So that makes me nervous. And I think our faith can speak a lot to that. Science can speak a lot to that. And then, of course, there's all kinds of sci-fi, speculative fiction where that could go great or where that can go wrong. So hopefully there's some cautionary tales out there we can pay attention to when it comes to that.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of topics there about how these machine learning algorithms and other AI systems recapitulate our biases. How And so how do we be careful about that? And of course, recognizing that the humans that are making decisions that we're proposing these systems replace are also have their biases, and so it's not that humans are perfect and machines are imperfect, or the other way around, but helping using the tools of AI to identify both our own biases and weaknesses, and then also investigate themselves and find ways to improve on that front. So I think that would be a good topic. If I were revisiting that section of the book, how do we use these tools for human flourishing and not human oppression or whatnot? Is it Cory Doctorow? Somebody has a notion of the reverse centaur, where like we're serving the tools rather than the tools are serving us. And so figuring out how we apply these things in a way where they are enhancing what we do, enhancing our jobs, enhancing our daily experiences, to free us up to be the most human version of ourselves, not the least human version of ourselves.
Right.
And that's where the reverse centaur comes in, is that you want a centaur to have a human head and torso and so forth, and a horse body, because then you get the benefits of the strength and speed of the horse, and the cognitive advantages of a human. You don't want the reverse centaur that has the mind of a horse and the legs of a human.
That's right.
Not that there's anything wrong with human legs, but
it's
not that. That's definitely the less good combination of the two. And so so making sure that that these tools are helping us to be our most human, not our least human, where we're just we're stuck doing the mechanical, repetitive things that or the dangerous things or whatever, and the tools get to do the creative tasks.
And a friend of the show, Trev Fuller, who even we did some of your book with way back when, has done some good work on AI, and then also a couple series of podcasts around kind of data colonization and what that looks like in terms of harvesting data and that kind of thing, and what that looks like. A lot of good work out there, and faith and science and people integrating the two, and being careful about it, but also not being scared of it, and sharing about way we could be good stewards of it too. So, as we wrap up here, Andy, as we put a bow on this, again, the link of this book is in our chat there, and then Hendrick's publisher. But I'm gonna throw one more question at you, and it's kind of a softball, but are we in a computer simulation, Andy? Are we? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Oh, you're asking me the fun question. Sorry, I was typing, and so I wanted to make sure I muted that, and then I forgot. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right.
While I'm stalling for time to think of an answer, I'll also let folks know if they're in an audio or visual medium that does not allow them to click on a link, they can also go to faithacrossthemultiverse.com, which is the name of the book, all one word. And that's a little page that I've set up, and you'll find links to the Hendrickson site there as well, or anywhere else you can get the book. I think you can still get the ebook through Amazon too, or Barnes & Noble, or all those places.
Faithacrossthemultiverse.com?
Faithacrossthemultiverse.com for all of your Faith Across the Multiverse needs. You can also find some links to my blog posts and other things that I've written for other places as well. It's not a great website, it's not extensive, but it will give you, it is an easier thing to type that'll give you some links to the stuff that you're looking for. Are we in a computer simulation? As much as I am a fan of the Matrix films, I find it hard to believe that there would be value in running a simulation this detailed for this long. Now, of course, you can always say, well, how do you know that you didn't just boot up 3 seconds ago with the memories of everything that you've experienced? And sure, I mean, we can have that problem whether we're in a computer simulation or not, right? We could also imagine that God created the world that way, so that's a long-standing philosophical question. But I don't, it can be a fun thing to kick around sometimes, but I find it hard to believe. I find, the rationale that led to, I think it was Nick Backstrom kind of championed the recent, if we extrapolate things about computer technology and so forth, there will be more simulated worlds than real worlds. And so the chances are that we're in a simulated world or higher than that we're in the real world, or we're in the base level reality. And I get that, but I think there are some assumptions in those extrapolations that may not necessarily hold. And so, yeah, I am inclined to say that this is as real as it gets, whatever this is, and that it behooves us to live as if this world is as real as it gets, because regardless of what kind of substrate or process is generating these, this is life. This conversation,
Yes.
I would much rather interact with you as if you are in fact another human being worthy of your own subjective experience, worthy of your own values and time and agency, and to treat you as such. And I pragmatically don't like where any of the other kind of roads might lead. And so,
Yeah.
in the absence of any actual evidence that we are in a computer simulation, to the extent that it's an open question, I think it makes sense to err on the side of this is the real world.
I'm with you. And I think sometimes when we start speculating or thinking about whether we're in a simulation, computer simulation, glitches in the matrix, whatever, then it just kind of loops back around to kind of theism. Then who wrote the program? And then my life is a program written. And then you have you loop back around to free will or controlled or destination or predestination. All those things is it's just a modern way of telling the same story of, is there a benevolent or malevolent force behind the universe, and am I here for a purpose? Were I created for a purpose? Am I here for a reason or not? All those big philosophical questions are still, you can't escape them, even if you say we're in some computer simulation, because it just seems like there's modern language, postmodern language thrown into a theistic understanding of a creator behind the universe. At least that's my simplistic way of kind of looking at it.
No, I think that's absolutely right. That it's just another version of God created the world. Just a different type of God, perhaps, or perhaps even not. Right? God is the great COBOL programmer or Fortran programmer.
Right.
Of the universe is not a terrible thought. Even if we are right, well, let's keep things interesting for ourselves and for the people watching the simulation. Right? No sense in kind of opting out or resorting to, well, I'm just going to run in a loop, right? Be the most interesting non-player character you can be.
And in multiverse, if there's a multiverse, if there's different versions of Will out there, I'm still this version of Will. I am my own decisions and thoughts and actions at this moment. And so whatever other version of Will out there, they still own their own consciousness and decisions and actions that embody or animate who they are. And so what we do matter. Our matter matters, no matter what spin you put on it in terms of whether it's a multiverse or computer simulation. One thing I love about your book is that there's the fantasy and creative world stories we tell, but yet is rooted in scripture, and we really talk about real, mere, legit science that's a part of our universe that we can examine and explore and experiment with to understand us and who God is. So yes. Find this copy, go to the website, contact Andy, DM us, we'll get you a copy. It is fantastic. It's not a short one, but man, it keeps you glued, especially if you're a big geek like me and you love all those things. Andy, anything else you want to share about the book or life or whatever that, we end this stream here in a few moments and you're like, dang, I wish I said that. Why did I let that go?
Yeah, great question. No, you've been very generous. I think we covered it. I haven't talked too many of the details of the specific analogies, metaphors in the book. So I think that's good. I think that leaves something for people to discover. Hopefully they've gotten a taste for it. And I'm excited to hear if other folks get something useful out of the book. It's always nice to know that the kids I put in the world are doing good things. I hear good things about my actual human kids, and every once in a while it's nice to hear a good thing about my book kid as well.
Amen. I feel you. And we're going to do future faith and science conversations. We may just pick a paragraph or a chapter in your book at some point in the near future and say, all right, let's expand this on a future thing. So we're going to keep doing these kind of episodes exploring faith and science because we think this is an important conversation now more than ever. And it's a big part of our fandom, a big part of the things we geek out on, our vocations, how we live in the world. And I think is important. So we're people of faith and believers in science, and we'll keep it going. Andy, thank you so much. And again, if you have questions, you have thoughts, if you anything you want to challenge us on, then feel free to reach out. We're very reachable when it comes to social media and our message boards and comment sections on the YouTube page. So guys and gals, people of all ages, well, no matter what you geek out on, no matter where you are in life or faith, just remember you are loved, you are not alone, and whatever you need, we're there for you. Peace. Thanks, y'all.